Okay, so I want to get into that. I do want to ask you one more sort of big picture item that people are worried about, and that is the woke trans
Mm.
agenda, right? And this is a lot of people say this is coming from communists. The Marxists are doing this to us. What is your take on that phenomenon that's happening amongst our youth? We are seeing. I mean, I could just say personally that I know several. I have parents, friends, siblings, very close friends they themselves either have a child who's come out and said, I'm now trans, or they are a teacher at a school with kids that are saying they're trans, or their best friend's kid is now trans. So this is like within my inner circle. I'm seeing a lot of this when I never saw this before. Growing up, it just didn't seem to exist. Now it seems to just be everywhere. So what is your take on that?
Well, I mean, we MAGA communists, we talk to our friends in Russia and in China who are communists, and they're completely baffled by the association people are making with Marxism and communism and this kind of what you call this woke stuff. I mean, they don't have that in their countries, and if they do have it, it's not associated with the communist view. There's nothing about Marxism which is somehow conducive to the LGBT movement in general. And as a matter of fact, I'm not necessarily for jailing or punishing people for having a different sexual orientation. But the facts are clear in communist countries. There was no unlimited sexual freedom. The Soviet Union criminalized homosexuality, and there's no real LGBT movement in places like China, which and in the Russian communist movement today, it's not really looked well upon either. So the association is very bizarre. Before we make what we are going to make of it, but regarding the question, I think what we're really dealing with is, on the one hand, I think there is an agenda. I think that's absolutely clear. There's an agenda at the highest levels of society to basically destroy the fabric of sexual norms in general. I think we've been observing this since the counterculture. Now, there is a connection to some elements or factions of the left historically. We have to be mindful of the fact that these leftists were specifically distinguishing themselves from the communist countries who they considered to be conservative and authoritarian. These are kind of the anarchistic, Trotskyists and so on and so on, who were in opposition to communism as it actually existed and who were actually fostered by America's intelligence agencies like the CIA and also the FBI and so on. So I think that's where a lot of the association comes from. But on the other hand, it's a huge decline of morale and a spiritual decline in general in the country, where people have a loss of purpose. Men, growing up specifically, don't know what it means to be a man anymore. They don't know what duties are to be expected of them, and exactly what the meaning of their role and their significance as males is. I mean, we don't have conscription anymore. A big part of the rite of passage into manhood used to be military service and conscription. We don't have that anymore. I'm not saying we should bring that back, but I'm just saying there's been a huge disorientation in terms of culture and in terms of society, and it's leading. And we need to be clear about one of the fundamental causes, which not a lot of people talk about, is pornography. We have never had a more, I don't know if this is a real word, pornographied
Mhm.
society than now. The access to it and how widespread it is insane. You go on the X app, which people say is supposed to be a news app. And I mean, think about it. How easy is it for children to have access to pornography nowadays? I think in the past, in the 70s, there was smut, there were stores that would just be selling it, and I guess it would be shady to go into them. But
Mhm.
it's literally everywhere now in the age of the internet.
Yeah.
And not to keep tooting the communist horn, but countries like China ban porn. I think that's actually very commendable, and I think that's probably a contributing factor to why they aren't seeing so much sexual confusion and frustration there when compared to the United States.
I'm having to look that
Um,
up because I didn't know that. So there is there yeah, pornography is illegal. It says it is available on the internet. Of course, people get around things,
right,
but it otherwise is not allowed in China. Interesting. Interesting. Japan, I know it's pretty big there and they've got a
right, yeah.
problem, right? But China, not as much. Interesting. Yeah, you make a really good point on this, that it is bizarre that people have equated this sort of woke trans, ideology and movement to Marxism and communism because you're right. Russia is a very conservative, socially conservative country. Asians, my family's Vietnamese. Vietnam's a communist country. Absolutely, much more. When I look at my two sides of the family, my Caucasian side is much more open and accepting towards individuals being different sexually or gender identity differences. My Asian side is not as accepting of that at all. So it is interesting that that is being that those two that oh yes it comes from that ideology, and it's like how where if anything it's promoting, like I just mentioned, Asian societies, these that the culture in these traditional communist Asian countries does not support, or I would say doesn't encourage individuality. And this trans movement, this woke ideology, is the ultimate
Right.
in individuality. It's so individual that you're saying, I don't even think I can reject biology and I can choose biology. It's one thing to choose your career,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
if you wanna know the Marxist take on it from most of the ones I've talked to overseas, they're basically saying this is the ultimate madness of capitalism. Like, you're literally denying something fundamental about our humanity, like, literally our sexuality, our
Our
biology,
biology, yeah.
so the pharmaceutical industry can make a ton of new profits. And I don't know if you know about doctors and surgeons who perform these gender confirming surgeries, how much they make off of those, how much insurance companies make off of them. I believe the ones that cover it, it's insane how much of an industry
Yeah.
it really is. And I don't know why people associate that with communism, because if you just think about it, it's really capitalism taken to its ultimate extreme, where you're literally starting to commoditize
Biology,
gender
yeah, which is
identity
just
itself.
right,
Yeah,
right, right.
yeah,
Yeah, that is the ultimate in capitalism, interestingly enough, this idea, and the ultimate in individuality, the fact that you could reject your biology and just choose, you know?
yeah, yeah.